In this Sikha, the Rebbe is going to show us how everything in the Alter Rebbe Siddur is very exact and very specific, and even the location, I'm not even talking about the nusach, the wording of davening, but the location where certain tefillas are located is big kavanah. So let's see the Sikh. Mitzvah Sefiras Ha'oimer, Inshallah, Nitztavinu b'Parshas Seinu. Like we have in yesterday's Chitas, said, V'sfartim lachem b'machas ha'Shabbos. Yom aviyachem, ad b'machas ha'Shabbos ha'Shvius, tispru chamishim yom. Mahave l'divrei chelik ma'meforshim v'aposkim, hachanu l'chag ha'Shvuos, zman matan Torah seinu. And later on, towards the end of the Sikh, we're going to point out, it's not just hachana, but al pi halacha, it's what makes the Yom Tov Shvuos up. You cannot have, the only way you can have Shavuos is because you counted the 49 days. So then you have the 50th day. That's why the Rebbe says about if you are not, you're across the date line, so then your Shavuos gets messed up, either it's earlier or later, etc. Anyway, well, I'm not going to go into that right now. Nitztavinu limnois memachras Yom Tov shel Pesach ad Yom Nesinas HaTorah. Why do we have such a tzivui? Laharois benafshenu hachefetz hagodol el hayoim hanichbad b'libeinu ke'eved yishaf tzeil. What does it mean? He's yearning for tzeil. So he says, Orev lanuach memelachtoi. In other words, can you imagine here in the middle of the, I'm mamish l'spol. I drive down over here in the middle of the summer, and you see these people in the heat of the day, and they're busy, whatever, doing the lawns and cutting the grass on the highway. And how can these people be out there in the heat like this? How don't they get heat stroke and the humidity? You can chalishen. But I'm sure they at least they were Mekayim this Indian. Ke'eved yishaf tzeil. They're searching for a moment when they're going to be able to rest a little bit in the shade. So the same way, we are expressing by counting Sefiras Ha'oimer that we are yearning for Matan Torah like that person out in the heat of the day, hoping for a moment of shade they'll be able to rest in. V'yimna tamid mosa yaveh eis hanichsaf elav sheyatzel lecheirus ki haminyan mar ba'adam or sheyetzel lecheirus ki haminyan mar ba'adam ki kol yishoy v'chol cheftza lahagia al azmanahu. That's what counting indicates. When you count, it shows that thirst, that yearning. You can't wait till it happens. You're counting the days. Mashma zu shel Sefiras Ha'oimer nekeres gam ba'halacha. Kefi shemuva inyan zeh ayde misper poskim ke'echad ataymim lakach she'ein mevarchim shechiyanu al Sefiras Ha'oimer. What's the connection? Shechiyanu, the halacha applies to a mitzvah that's completely standalone. But a mitzvah that's done in preparation for something else, you don't make a shechiyanu on. The Rebbe in the footnote says, for example, you don't make a shechiyanu on the mitzvah of bir chametz. You made a bracha on it. It's a mitzvah. I'll be your chametz. Why do you make a shechiyanu when you're burning the chametz? Or when you made it, let's say, on the bedikas chametz? Because that's a mitzvah leading up to something else. The mitzvah is not to have chametz in your house on Pesach. And to do so, you have this achana. So in the same way, we say that the shechiyanu doesn't apply by Sefiras Ha'oimer because it's about what we're leading up to. We're counting towards the days that we're going to get the Torah. Another thing that Rebbe points out in the footnote is the shechiyanu we don't say on a davar shel tsar. Why don't we make a shechiyanu by bris milah? Because it's tsara diyanuka, because it's painful for the child. The same thing when a person is in the state of yearning and he's like, when am I going to have the Torah already? It's painful. It's another beer of why we don't say shechiyanu. It's something that's so painful, we don't say shechiyanu on it. Anyway, b'chol zeis royim sheSefiras Ha'oimer hi mitzvah. Va'af b'shleimusa b'zman beis hamikdash, that's when it's the shleimus of the mitzvah. Why? Because what's the name of the mitzvah called? Sefiras Ha'oimer. It's counting from when we bring the Korban Ha'oimer. So that means the completion, the perfection of that mitzvah is only when we can bring the Korban Ha'oimer. These days that we don't have the Korban Ha'oimer, even though there's a mitzvah, and we say, Asher Kiddushanim Mitzvah Tzivanu, still in all, it's not the perfect way like in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. And then he says, V'chein bezman hazeh. So these days there's taka machloikis, lefi adeyas hashoynis, im ze mederaisa, mederabanan, is Sefiras Ha'oimer these days, min ha-Torah, mederabanan, because again, if it has to do totally with the Oimer, so these days when we don't bring the Korban Ha'oimer, maybe min ha-Torah, it's not an obligation. Or perhaps it is, it is, even though it's still an obligation min ha-Torah. Be that as it may, why do we do it mederabanan? We do it zeichel ha-Mikdash. Still in all, whatever it is, the Raisa Darabanan, it's still a mitzvah, mevarchim Allah, va'af yoser mekach, b'chol yoim. Every single day, we make a bracha on it. It's not a one-time bracha, we make a bracha at the beginning of Sefirah, and then the rest of the times, it's just part of that bracha. No. Every day we're making a bracha, every day it's a mitzvah. Ad asher be'emtzo Sefiras Ha'oimer, she mitzvah motel sal kol echad ve'echad miYisrael, usfartem lochem, shetehei sfira l'chol echad ve'echad. It says sfartem lochem, so the Chazal learn out, it's not like other types of spheres. When it comes to, let's say, the Yovel, the 50th year, with all the halachas that have to do with the Yovel, it says Bezdin has to count. There's no mitzvah on the person individually to count. The reason why it says usfartem lochem, it's repetitive. Usfartem lochem. If it says already usfartem, you shall count. Why does it have to add the word lochem? That comes to tell you that every single person has a mitzvah of counting. And through every yid counting, magim lakach shebiyom ha'chamishim la'omer yeh chag hashvuos. Okay, so that is the theme behind Sefiras Ha'oimer, and soon the Rebbe is going to circle back to this idea and connect it with the entire concept of davening. So he says, Lefi kol amar le'il, al mehusa shel Sefiras Ha'oimer, nitan lahavin, madua kava admur hazakin es mekayma shel Sefiras Ha'oimer b'soif Siddur. Yedua diak hamarbi hamarabi shel haseder shekolfa admur hazakin b'chol inyanai b'chlal. He had everything was mesudar by the Alter Rebbe. Ubimyuchad b'seder tefillah. Siddur is from the word seder. It's an order, which means it's organized. It's not just chaplaps, whatever. Asher muhusi he, as it says, if you ever saw the Siddur imdach, the fat Siddur that has a chassidus in it, what is the title called? It's called Seder Tfilas Mikol Hashomer. So we see the emphasis on the word Seder over here. And the footnote brings down that the Alter Rebbe had 60 different nuschos, and he chose and he combined from the 60 different nuschos that he had what he would include in the Siddur. Hadiyuk b'seder mudgish oid yoser, ba'ashva l'seder hatfilis b'siddur ha'arizal. When you compare it to the Siddur ha'arizal, we are nuschari. But not everything, as we're soon going to see, is exactly like in the Siddur of the Arizal. Varei Siddur Rishal Morzakin Hu Alpi Nuscha Arizal. But Kasheroyim She Siddurei HaArizal, because there's many different versions of the Siddur Ari. So when we look at different Siddurim of the Arizal, Einam Mistaimim B'Sefiras Ha'oimer, Ella B'Kavonis Shal Shmini Atzeres V'Simchas Torah. So therefore, the fact that we find this difference, so it means that when the Alter Rebbe put Sefiras Ha'oimer at the end of his Siddur, it was intentional. Because even though he based the Siddur on the Siddur of the Ari, but the Siddur Ari finished in a different way. The fact that the Alter Rebbe chose not to conclude his Siddur the way the Siddur Ari is concluded, that shows that there must be a certain kavanah. It's not just he was copying it out of the Arizal Siddur, a special kavanah why he did it this way. And later on we're going to explain specifically why the Alter Rebbe Siddur is this way, and also why the Arizal Siddur, which was a different type of Siddur, had to finish not with Sefiras Ha'oimer, had to do with Shmini Atzeres V'Simchas Torah. So first the Rebbe says, "B'pashtus nitin lahasbir shasib l'kach shad murazakim shina b'sidurim min haseder shel Siddur Arizal ki Siddur ad murazakim ki yaduam shave l'chol nefesh ve'ena kesiddur ha'arizal ha'miyud liyichides gula. U'kifi sheyadua gamkein, שמסיבה זו לא שיבץ האדמו"ר הזקן בסידורי as כל הכוונות של האריזל בסידורי. If you look in the Arizal Siddurim, there's different Siddurim that he points out on the bottom, there is included and around the tefillas different things that a person needs to minbechaven. The Alter Rebbe left out the vast majority of kavanas except in very few places, like Ana B'chayach, all those words on the side, we're supposed to have in mind. Or in the Halal Agadol, the Haidu, the 26 Haidus, where there's a Yud after 10 Haidus, a Hey after another 5, a Hey, those we're supposed to have in mind. And the Rebbe says, the fact that the Alter Rebbe included it in his Siddur, that his Siddur, the Alter Rebbe said specifically, Siddur Hashava L'chol Nefesh, so the few places that the Rebbe included Kavanas, it's because those Kavanas are applicable to everybody. But the rest of the kavanas that are found in Siduri Ari are not meant for everybody, they're just meant for Yechides Gula. Lefichach, Haseder b'Siddur Admor HaZaken hu, in the following way. Tadir, Kaidmol She'ena Tadir. First you have Shachras Mincha Ma'ariv, because that's constant. That's what every single day you got to do again and again. And then, V'amitzvahs Shal Eina Tadir, HaCholos Achas Bashana, like different Yom Tovim, Ukedoime, my fears if you say the Hashana, starting from Tishrei, you go what the order of the year is. It doesn't include over there necessarily the beginning over there of Tishrei. It says Chanukah, Purim, say the Korban Pesach, Haggadah Shel Pesach is part of the Alter Rebbe Siddur, Ula'acher Mikain Sefiras Ha'oimer, and that is the end of the Alter Rebbe Siddur. It's important to remember that that's going to be, around this is going to revolve the whole Sikha. Achiv and Shadmor HaZaken Kosav HaSiduri Behesem L'das HaPoiskim L'Halachem V'yachad Im Zois Birer V'liben Es HaNusach V'kavonas HaRizal. So he has both the Kabbalah view and the Halacha and the Nigla view. Ki im ki loy hetik as HaSoidis V'kavonas that HaRizal writes Kidei shadvarim yushavim l'chol nefesh gam l'mi she'enim mesugel l'chavel b'poil al hasoidus. So that's why the Alter Rebbe left those out. Harei muvan shegam haseder b'sidur einei rak behesem l'pashtus ha'inyanim ela gam behesem l'toichen ha'inyan hein benigla v'hein b'pnimiyusay. Because since the Siddur was both according to Halacha and according to Kabbalah, so every part, even of the order of the Siddur, is both expressing something al pi nigla, halacha, paskim, and something has to do with al pi pnimis inyan.
After all of this, what the Rebbe said, how come Kehas changed the whole Siddur?
That is a big, big question.
It's Kehas. It's not like somebody,
That Kehas and Eretz Yisrael is a little bit. I think it was Kehas and Eretz Yisraal that did that. They're a little bit off.
In America did the American even worse. Okay. Kehas and Eretz Yisraal, I just try to figure it like the thing. The American one is even.
When that came out, a lot of people, I can tell you, because we learned the Sikha, it was already a Mugadik Sikha then. It wasn't like some Favor from the Fabrengen and then afterward this liquid came out.
They changed it already before and
I don't remember. But one thing I can tell you is that we knew of the Sikha. We knew of the Mugadik Sikha when they changed it. So, that's...
They didn't change the Siddur itself, like they just added some thing like the
The Sikha is talking about putting Sefiras Ha'oimer at the end of the Siddur. And so they changed it to put it after Ma'ariv. They put it after Ma'ariv.
Change it Dafka, look like
On whose plate is it? No, it changed it because to make it to people like more easier. No, you're saying like according to this.
The truth is, if you really want to see, you'll see that the word changes already in other things. In footnote, where's the footnote over here? In one of the footnotes at the beginning, where it brings over there from the Rebbe, from what the Rebbe Rashab said in the name of the Tzemach Tzedek, footnote 10, that there was a lot of things that were like changed because even before, there was something called a Restover Siddur. There was a Siddur printed with, you're old enough to remember this. these very thin Siddurim they had in 770, they were called Rastavar Siddurim. They literally tried to save as much as possible and not reprint things. So let's say all the parts of Psukei de Zimra on Shabbos, they said, go look up the Psukei de Zimra. Now, I had thought initially this had to do, they printed a lot of these Siddurim originally to give to soldiers. A lot of people were drafted by the Russo-Japanese War to give the soldiers. They had to also save money and should be smaller or whatever. But it goes back, if you look in footnote 10, that this was like this, the design already in the times of the Alter Rebbe. That's how his Siddur was designed. And he was Mitzayin with, like in that style. That Alter Rebbe didn't go ahead. The Alter Rebbe said, look up Ashrei over there. By Ashrei Voltzin even. Look up Ashrei over there. You could see in footnote 10, he brings that down. And the Tzemach Tzedek made sure, told them, make sure don't go ahead and play with this. Because even these things about order, minor things, also. So we see already that there were changes that since then were made under the Rebbe's allowance. Because in the times of the Rebbe, they printed it that way. But on the other hand, they didn't, it was called actually Siddur Tilas Hashem, I think for a reason maybe also. Why was it called Siddur? Let's call it Alter Rebbe Siddur. Or Seder Tfilos Mekol Hashanah, which I think was the name Takad Alter Rebbe. So, this might be part of the excuse. I don't know. Anyway, so back to the Sikha. So he says, "Ulefizi yesh loymar mekach Sefiras Ha'oimer nikva b'siyum b'chayis ma'siddur." So Mitzvah Sefiras Ha'oimer madgisha b'yoyser es mehusay shel inyan atfila al pi hanigla v'al pi hasoid kidlahalan. The Rebbe's approach over here is hakoil hoylech achar achitum. Everything goes according to the conclusion. The fact that the Siddur is concluded with this, so that shows that this is the message of the Siddur. What Sefiras Ha'oimer is about concludes and signs off the entire idea of the Siddur.
After Sefiras Ha'oimer, there is more stuff.
That was things that was added later on, like Kriyas HaTorah wasn't in the Alter Rebbe Siddur, for example. But if you look, let's say in the...
you have Slichot, you have Shana Rabbah.
So again, Slichos, and these things weren't in the Alter Rebbe Siddur, not Slichos. That's why you have to have, that's why Sefer Menogim had to tell you the whole order of the Slichos and everything, because the Slichos, I don't believe, were in the Alter Rebbe Siddur. So here we're talking about specifically the Alter Rebbe Siddur, what's called Seder Tfilos Mekol Hashanah. By the way, Siddur Tilas Hashem was really taken from a different Siddur that had this whole print. That's why there's some things inserted over there. There was even some earlier prints that you saw X'd out certain things. In the, whatever. That was really copied from some other Siddur, but they redesigned it according to our shit. But anyway.
Yeah, but actually this is answering the question he asked, because even though that according to the Sikha, like Sefiras Ha'oimer, it's the end, but still then after like the years,
that's why I'm trying.
They added more stuff.
That's why I'm trying to give a limud zchus.
Yeah.
But still, in all, once the Rebbe said the Sikha and explained so powerfully how Sefiras Ha'oimer belongs at the end, to just pick it up and move it right next to mine, it struck a little bit funny. Anyway. ויש לומר שעניין מיוחד זה של ספירס האוימר הוא גם בחפצה של התפילה ושל ספירס האוימר וגם בגברה כפי שיוסבר להלן בהרחבה. The Rebbe loves these two terms. Cheftza means the object and Gavra means the person. Just to give you a general concept, Cheftza and Gavra is, for example, if a person is not allowed to eat chametz on Pesach, or he's not allowed to eat food on Yom Kippur, is it just something that's on the Gavra? It's the person that has this Isser, but the object is not a Davar Asr? Or do you say that food is a Davar Asr on Yom Kippur, or Chametz itself is a Davar Asr on Pesach? Or there's a question about, there's a different Mefarshim talk about it, on Isser de Rabbanon. Let's say things that the Rabbanon said were Asr. Bishalakum, Pasakum, whatever, Chalavakum. Different situations that Rabbanon said something is Asr. Is it only that they made it Asr on the person? It's an Isser Gavra, it's the person, or it's an Isser Cheftza? The Rebbe is going to broaden this concept concerning there's the Cheftza and the Gavra of davening. There's the object, the mitzvah of davening, and then there's the person that davens. And the same thing, we're going to talk about the person that's counting Sefirah, and then the count of the Sefirah itself.
Mine of coming, huh?
You'll see.
Okay.
Mitzvah Tefillah hi kedivrei harambam. The Rebbe a lot of times brings this Rambam. That's a very important thing. And he also brings, in the footnote, Reb Chaim, very famous Reb Chaim, that elaborates upon this. Mitzvahs esa liyispalel b'chol yoyim. Now see how the Rambam explains what tefillah is. Shenemar va'avadetem es havaya lekeichem. Mipi hashmua lamdu, meaning this is what we were in Mekabel, this is what it's brought down Teresh Balpeh. Sha'avoida zu tefillah shenemar la'avdei b'chol avavchem. Amru chachamim, eizo avoida shebelev zu tefillah. So right away, when the Rambam talks about the mitzvah of davening, he connects it with the heart. It's not you daven, but you should have heart also. No, the very definition of davening is avodah shebelev. The very davening itself is a heart. It has to do with the heart. As mitzvahs ha'eseh, lavedas Hashem b'chol yoyim b'tefillah. It does say lispalel b'chol yoyim. The mitzvah is to serve Hashem. How do you serve Hashem? I serve Hashem through davening. It's a different darga over here. It's not I have to say words, but I have to know what I'm saying. No. It's about connecting with Hashem, it's serving Hashem. But I do that through saying the words of davening. Echad ha'izbeirim b'derech ha'niglo lekach. Sha'atfilah hi avodah shebelev. Niten lahavim aloshna Rambam atzmai. Chiyuv mitzvah zu kachu. She'a'adam meschanen u'mespalel b'chol yoyim. U'magid shvoche shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'achar kach shoyel tzrachav shu tzarech lehom b'kasho b'tchina. V'achar kach noisin shevim v'yidol Hashem al ha'toiva she'yishpi alai. Which means, how is Shemoneh Esrei divided up? There's the first three brachas of Shemoneh Esrei, which we speak about the Eibishter's greatness. All these things. Once we finish Hakel HaKadosh, so we have the middle brachas, Mishpat, all the different bakashas, and then Shema Keleinu, the conclusion of all the bakashas, whatever we need, and then the rest, Moedem Anachnu Lach, and the rest is Shevach Vayedah to the Eibishter. So what does this mean? What's the Rambam trying to explain over here? Mitzvahs shebamaisa. What are mitzvahs in the world of action? That's one sug. Vehein ba'asiyah kipshuta b'poel mamish k'en levishas tzitzis hanochas tefillin v'chedoymer. Another category that generally falls into action, vehein b'dibur, which the Chazal called dibur maisa zutrasa, a minor action. It's still an action. Or there's an expression, akima svasav have a maisa. The movement, the lips moving around, that's also an action. Keep going. Kriyas ha-megillah, sipur yitzias mitzrayim v'kedoymer. She'ikir kiyum ha-mitzvah hu pu'ulas ha-dibur v'akriya. In both, the action is the main thing, or the reading, the speaking is the main thing. Then there's a second category of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs she'chayvus halavavis, kain avas Hashem, yiras Hashem v'kedoymer. She'ikir hakavana v'hergish al adam v'machshavta yubaliboy. Hayichud shel mitzvah tefillah hu shel amrois shechayavim l'kaima dafke b'dibur. Taki, you have to say the words of davening. A healthy person that can speak is not yoytze if he only thinks the words of davening. Nachman l'tzlan, if a person is meshutek, he can't speak, whatever, so then he davens in his mind. But a healthy person is supposed to pronounce, he's supposed to express the words of davening. The chol zois, ma'isa mitzvah satfilah. What does it mean, the mitzvah of davening? What is the action of davening? The action of davening is not saying the words of davening. That's not the action of davening. But she'eh adam mischanen u'mispalel b'chol yoyim. What does the Rambam mean by the word mischanen, tachnunim? Kavonas hamila mischanen hi havoida v'hergish b'leva adam. V'loi ha'asiyah v'adibur. Ich bet sich beim Eibischen. But how do I have this beten beim Eibischen, this requesting and speaking to Hashem and asking from Hashem? So we need to do it in speech. But the words is not the main thing. It's the connection, it's the asking from Hashem, it's the addressing Hashem, it's serving Hashem that I have in davening. Amnam, yesh mispar mitzvah shenikva b'dinon, shein tzrichim kavona, lasis dei chayva, basi yisayis mitzvah. V'kasha chasera kavona, lo yasi dei chavasim min ha'toyram. Ach, b'mitzvahs elu, ha'machshava hi kavonas ha'mitzvah bolvad, ach ein hi chelik min ha'mitzvah atzma. It doesn't make up the mitzvah, even though it's necessary. But the mitzvah is still the action. For example, a person that was toikeh shofar li-Islamid, he was practicing blowing shofar. So either him or someone listening is not going to be yotzeh, even though it's Rosh Hashanah in the morning and it came the time to blow shofar. It's not going to be yotzeh. Why? Because he has to have in mind, I'm doing it l'shem the mitzvah of tkiyas shofar. So even though the kavanah is very important to the mitzvah, but the kavanah is not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is blowing or hearing the sound of the shofar. The kavanah just makes sure that the mitzvah is like done in the right way. The ilu mitzvah tefillah. Here we're going to talk about the Cheftza versus Gavra. Ha-Cheftza shel ma'aseh tefillah. What is the object? What is the action of tefillah? Hu mischanen u'mispalel kavanas halev. Ukaloshna Rambam behemshech, that the Rambam writes over there, va'ach kach shoyel tzrachav shu tzarech lahem bebakasho betchina. It's not, okay, I'm saying the brachas that are over there in Shemoneh Esrei. I'm asking, I'm requesting. V'l'shem kach yesh tzorech ba'achana, the Rambam says, sheyifanes libay mikol ha'machshavos v'yira atzmai kilu oimer lifnei hashchina. Because since he cleared his mind of anything that could disturb his focus and his thinking about the Eibishter. If a person does not have this type of clarity of mind, that I as a person did not do what I'm supposed to do, here's what the difference in Gavra and Cheftza. Dibur einenu klal tefillah, says the Rebbe. I said the words. Words is not davening. Words could be by Haggadah, Shal Pesach, maybe words is something. Sheis Zechiris, maybe words could be something. But davening is not words. And if I was just saying words, it wasn't davening. The object of davening, the cheftza of davening was missing. Not just the gavra, the person was missing davening. The cheftza is missing. This is
I don't have any but just l'shem. Yotzi on all it feel except the first pasuk of Shema.
Because
and the first,
those are the main parts of davening. So you need to have at least those things to be yotze davening. But it comes out from what the Rebbe is saying over here that you didn't. The rest of the time, we're just not making you say it over or whatever, but you didn't really daven the rest of the time. It wasn't davening, you were saying words. On the other hand, knowing our generation, you're not going to tell a person, you're not having in mind anyway, just daven the first 3 brachas over there, Shemoneh Esrei, and just daven the first pasuk of Krishma, because hopefully, as we get a little bit older, we get a little bit smarter, we'll start paying attention when we're saying Ashrei, we'll start paying attention when we're saying Yishtabach, hopefully we'll start then paying attention to more and more, eventually we'll get used to it.
Also, the Rebbe says in the time that you can start.
That's right.
Part of it, feel it with Kavanah here, try and then part there.
Yeah.
Start all the different colors.
Yeah, that's an amazing word the Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says. Inyan Zem, he says, Shadafka Yidiyah Vakavana, Yoitzer Mesachefzer Shal Tfilam, Mizbate Begoli Sefiras Ha'oimer. Now we're going to connect this idea with Sefiras Ha'oimer. Admur Azakim Poisek, Mutter Lisper Bechol Lashon Shemevin. Avalim eine meiven haloshen shesipur boy. Afilu sofer beloshen hakodesh im eine mevinoi lo yatsa the kiven she'eini yedea haminyan ein zu sfira klal. You have to count. If you don't understand that you're counting, you didn't count. You don't understand what you're counting, you didn't count. Kaloima. Mitzvah Sefirah einena ha'pu'ula shel Sefiras Ha'oimer b'dibur. Just like davening is not about saying the words in speech. Lamrois sheyesh hechach b'am kach. There is an obligation to say it out, like we said before. El yediyas ha'adam. Ubeli kavanas ha'adam v'yediyasayim. Hari loy zuvalvad shuayni yotzi dei chayvus ha'sefirah. Ela af einze meisese cheftza shel Sefirah einzu Sefirah klal. The Alter Rebbe says an amazing expression. Einzu Sefirah klal. If you don't know what you're counting, it's not considered Sefirah. That's why Rabbi Pinney makes sure to after Sefiras Ha'oimer, after saying it in Hebrew, he actually translates it in English so people should know what they're saying. They should or repeat after him. Kiven shemitzias hatfilah nitzaras aide kavanas adam v'avidasoim muven sheberoish uberishoyna choshuv hashinui shechal begavra aide hatfilah v'chanosoi la. The person changes through davening. V'gam zoi nekudam shutefes l'tfilah u'sfiras ha'oimer loirak b'cheftza shal mitzvah. Not only in the cheftza of davening, and the cheftza of sfira is there a common denominator at tzad hashava, but also in the effect on the person, how tefillah affects the person and how sfira affects the person. They have a tzad hashava. Hatfillah she'ikrei tefillas hamidam hikasher Yehudi oimed ka'avda kamemori lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'yira atzmai ki'iluhu oimed lefnei Hashchina va'azu mischanan mispalel hu haifech liyos mitziyah shal mispalel. He is not a parrot. He is not just saying words. He is a davener now. He is someone that's addressing Hashem. Kasher adam mefanes libay mekol machshavos, like the Rambam says. U'mischanan u'mispal lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that itself changes the person. That itself, that I am talking to the Eibishter, that makes me different. Harei be'etzem pula zu mishtana u'mis'ala matzavi ha'koidem hu oimed b'matzav shoyna legamri. Oz chal shinui v'chidush begavra. The person himself is now different. V'gam inyan zeh mudgish b'Sefiras Ha'oimer. Kasher kol Yehudi Oimer pashtus b'tfilosei la'achar ha'sfira shloisa ha'layla ata tzivisanu lisper Sefiras Ha'oimer kedei l'tahareinu miklipeseinu u'mitumaseinu k'mesha kasav b'soyresecha kedei sheyitaharu nafshis amchi Yisrael mezumasam. So it's the same idea. The person becomes changed through Sefirah, just like the person becomes changed through davening. Kol HaKasher Amar Le'el u'mitzad pu'lasei v'avodasei shel ha'adam b'tefillah u'b'Sefiras Ha'oimer. Yeshna yichud noisef b'tefillah l'gabe roiv shar mitzvahs b'tachlisa shel ha'tefillah. The goal, the purpose, what are we trying to accomplish? Ikran shel roiv ha'mitzvahs u'mais ha'mitzvah. Ubeshleimus, when is it the perfect way of doing it? Yachadim kavanas ha-mitzvah. Ubekach histayma ha-mitzvah mitzad ha'adam. I'm putting on film. Yeah, I'll be chassidus, when I put on film, I'm drawing down kedusha on the film, whatever it is. But that's not my concern. That's like already the Eibishter's department. My concern is, my mitzvah is entirely, I put on film. And if I'm doing it right, in the Siddur it says what I'm supposed to have in mind. The tefillin shel yad, the tefillin shel roish, the shivud halev, the shivud hamayach, and all these different things. Fine. But once I put on film, that's it. Ach shoyne mitzvah satfilah, mitzad echad etzem mahus satfilah shei adam mischana mispal. Shoyel tzrachav shu tzarich lahem. The emphasis, what I need. I have to think about things that I need. Bebakasha or betchina. I think there's a printing mistake over here. Shakadosh Baruch Hu yimales bakashasai. That's what he's asking. Ein ze davar acher milvad hatfilah. The Eibishter fulfilling his request is a continuation, is an outcome, is a result of his davening. I'm davening that the Eibishter should do something for me. I need something, and I'm asking the Eibishter to help me. Elazoya mashmoy shall call ma'isa tefillah bakosha me'es HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'yimalas bakosha. Ach yachadim zois, kiyum mitzvahs tefillah ein a tole klal b'milah bakosha l'poil. Ha'adam mekaymes mitzvahs tefillah b'shleimus be'etzem tachnuna v'tefillasei, whether or not his bakosha was fulfilled or not, doesn't make a difference. And it's chutz from that there's no tefillah chezeres reikam. Somewhere, somehow, it has some type of effect. But the point is, on the one hand, davening is just about the davening. On the other hand, the davening is for a purpose, to draw down, to ask the Eibishter for something I need. Sefiras Ha'oimer he mitzvah shemahava hachana l'chag hashvuos l'matan Torah kidl el b'sif aleph b'miyuchad l'fi bir hazoyar she'asfira b'meshach shivas hashvuos doima l'sfiras shiva nekiyim, by a woman, by a married woman before she goes to the mikveh. So just like there, it's to be able to reach a state of tara, to be able to go to mikveh. The same thing, the 7 weeks that we count by a yid is b'doimel azeh, to purify ourselves, to cleanse ourselves before Matan Torah. Sha'idei kach mitayrim Yehudim es atzmim l'kras knisosim l'chuppah b'Matan Torah b'chag hashvuos. It's a chuppah. It's a marriage between yid and the Eibishter on Shavuos. Ach yachadim zois nasis hatzvira mitzvah ubebracha, which shows on hamshacha b'fnei atzma. The sfira itself is its own mitzvah. True, it's about reaching a goal. It's about preparing for Matan Torah. But the sfira itself is a mitzvah, just like the davening itself is a mitzvah for itself. This very fact that I'm looking for the Eibishter, that I'm yearning for the Eibishter, that itself is a mitzvah. Not just the Teitzah, not just the outcome that afterwards I'm going to have Matan Torah. Taras Yisrael Mizum Masam. That's what's being accomplished every day with the Sefirah. That is an end in itself. Bekach mudgeshes chashivusa shal avodas adam k'shela atzmam. Lefi zeh, niten lahasbir es ha'hevdel shebein Siddur ha'arizal lebein Siddurai shal Admor HaZaken lamrois shesiduri shal Admor HaZaken mechoven lefi nuscha ha'arizal. Hevdel hamudgish miyad ba'ascholoseyim shal Siddurim, how the beginning of the Alter Rebbe Siddur is different than the beginning of the Arizal Siddur. Siddur Arizal maschil bechlolus tikkun v'aliyas oilmas. According to Kabbalah, davening, I'm making all different types of things in oilmas al yonim take place. All different types of amshachas and tikkunim and every yichudim al yonim. That's what tefillah is al pi Kabbalah. Siddur shal Admor HaZaken maschil b'moidah zois mailas kimas chasois halayla al kein yisametz lokum b'chasois eiz halayla, at least sheyuchol v'liyos mechlal avdei Hashem. So at least once in a while, he says, to get up at midnight, whatever, to be part of avdei Hashem. So the Arizal focuses on the Olam Esal Yoinim, and the Alter Rebbe focuses on me being an Eved Hashem. That is the theme of the Alter Rebbe Siddur versus the theme of the Siddur of the Arizal.
Printing the Nar Siddurim too?
I don't remember. I don't think so. Hezbel kachu lefi pnimius ha'inyanim hamuvas b'siddur Arizal hamiyud, like we said, liyichidis gula mechavnim kavonis v'yichudim harei atfila eina kelelas rak es avoidas v'aliyas ha'adam elagam u'bi'ikir es materes atfila. And how do we see that? That's the job of the davening. V'tchilasa, it begins with what? The Siddur Arizal, Tikkun v'aliyas ha'oilamos. Shezel makar ha'amshachas, ha'amshachas l'mata, binyanim ruchnim v'gashmim. Roi v'choylema, v'arach hashanim v'kadoyma. The reason why down here in this world, there could be through davening, that the sick are healed and so on, it's because they know how to draw down the hashpahs above in the oil misal yoinim, and then that affects also down here into this world. In the Siddur Arizal, ein mefia Sefiras Ha'oimer hamadgishas avodas ha'adam b'siyum ha'siddur kichoisem v'tachlis. The conclusion is what shows what's the purpose. No, Sefiras Ha'oimer is not at the end. Elihi mefia lifnei ulacharei mefia satfilas v'akavonas shashal shregalim v'chol Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim v'chol. ad l'shmini atzeres simchas Torah, shemehusam hi hashleimes b'hamshachas hamshachas l'mato. Shmini atzeres simchas Torah, that's the conclusion, that's the end of what's coming down from the spiritual worlds down here. Ilu b'Siddur shel Admor HaZaken, shenichtav ba'ifna shavu l'chol nefesh, kasher hasoidis v'akavonis einem begali kidleil, nikva Siddur ba'oifin shebe'inyan hatfila mudgeshes yoser avodas shel ha'adam. Kvish nisbar leil bar chava, shehein ha'cheftza shel hatfila, v'hein aliyas ha'adam, that the person becomes changed, ha'gavra tluyim ba'avodas ha'adam. Umsiba zu, he starts off the Siddur with avodah, avdei Hashem. Umagdir miyad ba'aschala hamayla shalkimu b'chatzois shebekach nichlolim ba'avdei Hashem. Uleficha gam ein hasiddur mistayim b'tfilas v'kedoyme hakshuris l'kedushas hachag, because kedusha is something that comes from above. It's a gilui momayla kedusha, but rather it concludes with something that has to do with my avodah. El Sefiras Ha'oimer she kol kula pulas v'avodas ha'adam b'chol ha'inyanim hanal. Alulim lachshoiv sh'avodas shal yochid b'Yisrael u'b'miyuchad avodas shal Sefiras Ha'oimer belvad einem mesugeles la'ashpia la'olam tikkun olam. According to this, maybe you'll say that avodah, my avodah, has nothing to do with fixing up all the worlds. Ach Sefiras Ha'oimer madgisha b'kach sheroyim es hashpa'asa shal avodah yoyser masher b'chol avodah acheres. How do you see that? Kviyas yomtev b'chlal tluya b'bnei Yisrael dekatshinu l'zmanayu. Yidden are the ones that establish when Yomtev is going to be. Because when Bezdin proclaims that today is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so 15 days from now will be Pesach. When Bezdin proclaims that today is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, so today will be Rosh Hashanah, and 10 days will be Yom Kippur, and 15 days will be Sukkot. So Yidden are the ones that have a control over Yomtev. Ach davke, it still has to go through a certain procedure. B'emtzos Kiddush HaChodesh Shel Bezdin, Kiddush HaChodesh Shel Bezdin, Klal, v'tfilaseim shel Yisrael b'meshech haragolim heim teitzah u'moisifos b'kedushas Yomtev. But the actual Yomtev itself is not created by an individual Yid. U'b'doim l'kach b'Shabbos she mekatshe v'kaime. Shabbos is not like Yomtev that Bezdin makes, but Shabbos exists on its own as a davar that's Kaddish. Yeshnoi tesefes ayidei lekadshi kiddush v'tfilas b'nei Yisrael. Yidden add to the kedusha of Shabbos, it says. In Chassidus, it's also brought down, there's a level of, different levels of Oynik Shabbos, there's a Ma'anig as a Shabbos. We add Tainuk to Shabbos, Ma'anig as a Shabbos. So we can add to it. But the main point is that we don't create Shabbos, and we as individual Yidden don't create Yom Tov. Only the Klal, only Bezdin. Ach b'Sefiras Ha'oimer roim sheb'emtzos ha'Sefira shel kol yochid b'fnei atzmai shel loy b'emtzos Bezdin nikva chag ha'shvuos hu einoi toli b'kfir shel Rosh Chodesh, which Bezdin are the ones that decide when Rosh Chodesh is. Ki atzeres pa'amim chamisha, pa'amim shisha, pa'amim shiva. In the times when there used to be Mekadesh according to Bezdin, so then sometimes Shavuos could come out on the 5th, sometimes on the 6th, sometimes on the 7th of Sivan, depending if Iyar was a Malay, if Nisan was a Malay, if both of them were Malayim, so then it was the 5th. If both of them were Chasedim, both of them were, then it was on the 7th. If there was one Malay and one Chaser, the way we do it now, according to the Kvi of the calendar, so then it's on the 6th. But what's the main point over here? Not the calendar date, but it's what we counted. Elu tamid b'yem chamishim la'omer ka'amar le'il. Ada sheb'mispa pratim ki goyim l'gabi Yom Tov sheni shel Golius chag hashvuos chamer yoser v'miyadem acherim ki einu nikva mishum safek k'moyedem acherim ela yesh by koyach shel vaday. It says, the Rebbe brings this down, the Rebbe speaks about this a lot, that the Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Pesach, whenever we have 2 days Yom Tov, why we keep 2 days Yom Tov? Originally, we kept 2 days Yom Tov because out of a suffix. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. Shavuos was never kept out of a suffix. Why? Because by the time they found out when Pesach was, when Rosh Chodesh Nisan was, and you count 49 days, and then the 50th day is Shavuos. By Shavuos, you knew already that the second day Shavuos was only done because Minig Avosenu B'Yadeinu, because of it was the Chodesh Chachamim. So therefore, it has much more strength, and in halacha there is something stronger even when it comes to the second day of Yom Tov Shavuos than the second day of the Yom Tov of Pesach, the second day of Yom Tov of Sukkot, and so on. And that's why, thanks to who? Because Yidden are the ones that count. Yidden make this up. And like I mentioned before, and that's why, ad kedei kach, if a person crosses the date line, so then he might have to make Shavuos early, or he might have to make Shavuos later. And there's all different types of shilos, and the Rebbe says to avoid it. You should not cross the date line during Sefirah, etc. But rather, if you have to travel to somewhere that's going to cross the date line, you should go the long way around. But anyway.
So in these cases, you need to do a different time of the Chag?
Yeah, and there's all different types of things how he has to do it, because since everybody else is keeping Yom Tov, he also has to keep Yom Tov. And also, he's not going to be able to say, I think, Zman Matan Teresenu. It's a whole complicated thing that he lets himself into. I know people in LA that travel to Australia for, let's say, Pesach, to be with their kids or to be with their parents or whatever, and they come back in Shavuos, it's a whole mishmash by them, and they have to they end up keeping 3 days Yom Tov or whatever. Okay. Bekach mudgeshes malas havodis ha'adam betfila b'chlal. Hatfila inana ra kidei lahamshich lamata ba'oil masmashach var kaim lamayla b'shoyrish ha'makir el ha'chidish betfila hu yihi ratzon. This difference that Rebbe says is the difference in bracha. When a tzaddik, for example, gives a bracha, or Yaakov Avinu gives a bracha is only hamshacha from the makir and the shoyrish. If it's not in the source, you can't draw it down. That's why it was Ephraim and Menashe. He told him, I can't give Menashe a better bracha because it's not shaykh to draw down from a higher source from Menashe. It wasn't there. But tefillah is about going beyond that. Yihi ratzon means it should be the will. We want a new will from the Eibishter. Yitziras ratzon chadash kiviyachol by Hashem. Before he wasn't wanting this thing, and now kiviyachol Yid is creating by Hashem a new will. Sheinenu kaim b'shorish hamakim. V'zeh magia la'olam lamatam mishanas and Evroim. It reaches to the world down here below. Mikimoy shehem, and changes the people the way they were from when they were. Yisrape achoyle. First, the guy was not well. Now he becomes healed. V'yer dageshem mishamayim la'aretz v'yer lidavay tzmicha. V'ilu b'tayr mitzvahs b'chlal ein shini b'klav shal tefillin la'dei anachasam b'roish k'mevur b'tanya. That's what's special about davening. Davening is about impacting the world. The same thing, just like Sefirah. It impacts the world that we have the idea of the Yom Tov of Shavuos based on this. Ba'ofen shebay mevuri not filai de admor azachim asbe primis and yanim yuven toiv yoyser hakesher shebay not filas bein Sefiras Ha'oimer ubehesem la'amr la'il. Belekoti toira mazba admor azachim shat fila einan nechlalas b'minyan taryaga mitzvahs. Very interesting thing. 613 mitzvahs, tefillah is not part of it. Mishum shat tefillah hi hakavana shekal toira mitzvahs. V'ha'amad ha'makayim kal taryag mitzvahs dugmas chut ha'shedra. Just like there's Ramach Evorim, the Ramach mitzvahs correspond to the 248 Evorim. But the Chut HaShedra, which holds up the entire body and brings everything, the whole communication from the brain and everything, the entire body come through the Chut HaShedra, that's not one of the 248 Evorim. The same thing, davening, the Alter Rebbe says, like the Chut HaShedra. And there's 18 brachas, there's 18 chulias in the Shedra, 18 sections in the Shedra. Iker inyan atfilah hu she'oirin saf baruch hu anayla mishtalshlus in a level that's called Eila v'loyla midoisa. We have to daven to the Eibishter and not to the Sefiras. Yum shach lamata b'seder ishtalshlus. V'abracha shel tfil shemenesra hein hakelim lamshacha lamata sheyikuyimu anyonim shel roif yechoylim v'varach hashanim. That's what the brachas shemenesra are. Yashloimar she'inyan zeh mudgish b'miyuchad b'Sefiras Ha'oimer. What do we say? Through this mitzvah Sefiras Ha'oimer, yushba shefa rav b'chol ha'olamas. Just like by davening, just like by Shemoneh Esrei, we're drawing down all the olamas, the chayes halakhi. B'doy b'lam shacha klal shleir nesav b'chol ha'olamas aydat tefillah. V'chein b'vav ha'chibur, the lashon the Rebbeinu Shalom, says, "Ve lesaknes nafsheinu v'chaseinu shemseinu mechal sigu pgam." Hamshacha klol shel shefa rav yeredes leprotim. It's not just in the general worlds, but in my nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Lekelim, leshanis, and nevroim, v'kadoyme, ka'amri lifnechem binyat tefillah, like we said beforehand concerning davening, that davening transforms me. V'idea isuk v'hilchas Sefiras Ha'oimer v'adibur binyanah b'amtzas kiyum mitzvah Sefiras Ha'oimer b'shleimus ha'efsharis b'zman hazeh. We could do it as best as possible. We could do it these days. Shu zecher l'migdash koilo la'isuk b'hilchas Sefiras Ha'oimer b'nigla primis ha'toira mechishim es kiyum ha'tfilah nemeres miyad lachar Sefiras Ha'oimer yachsud lana avoytz beis ha'migdash l'mkaima. What's l'mkaima? So he says, just like it says by Mashiach, Yivna Beis HaMikdash from Kaima, he says over there in the Ha'ara, when the Kaimas HaMitzvah Kitikuna, because then we'll do it, behemshech to the actual bringing of the Karm Noimer, b'mheir revein mamish, amin salah.